Due to the graphic nature of this urban legend, listener discretion is advised. This episode includes descriptions of suicide, gun deaths, and stalking. We advise extreme caution for children under 13. You really tried to be a good parent. You gave him his space, let him wear what he wanted. You didn't comment on the piercings or the tattoos. You encouraged him to be who he was, even if who he was had terrible taste in music. You weren't sure if it was the same song or if the atonal screeching and tortured electric guitar just sounded all the same. But morning, noon, and night, it was all he played. You wanted to respect his autonomy. It was his free time. He had to grow out of it, right? You'd bring him a meal or invite him to come outside, and he'd just be sitting, staring at the wall as the guitar strummed and the singer screamed. The cacophony made your skin crawl and ears ring. It didn't sound like music. It sounded like someone was being murdered. He killed you first, then your partner. A shotgun shell each, then a bashed-in face. He was always an efficient kid when he put his mind to it. Then he walked out the door, eyes glazed, face bloody, his black t-shirt caked with viscera and gore. And no one ever saw him again. Welcome to Haunted Places, a Parcast original. I'm Greg Polson. Today's episode is part of our Urban Legend series. Every Tuesday, we explore those chilling stories you hear secondhand, the kind that seem made up but contain a kernel of truth. Urban Legends is only on Spotify, so keep listening here to never miss an episode. But don't forget to come back each Thursday for a classic episode of Haunted Places, covering yet another ghost-filled locale. You can find episodes of Haunted Places and all other Parcast originals for free on Spotify. To stream Haunted Places on Spotify, just open the app and type Haunted Places in the search bar. Today, we're exploring an urban legend sacred to metalheads everywhere. Backward masking, or backmasking, is a controversial technique used to put hidden messages in recordings that only reveal themselves when they're played backwards. While some musicians have used the idea to enhance their music, others have faced allegations that their songs conceal subliminal, malevolent instructions for their fans. Instructions that in some cases include murder. Up next, we drop the needle on our first demonic recording. On December 23, 1985, in Reno, Nevada, 18-year-old Ray Belknap and 20-year-old James Vance got drunk and high while listening to Judas Priest's album, Stained Class. When they finished the song Better By You, Better Than Me, the two young men then went to a playground outside a church. Ray Belknap shot himself with a shotgun. He died instantly. Vance intended to follow, but survived the self-inflicted gunshot. He was left with disfiguring injuries and died 3 years later. Shortly before he died, James Vance's parents brought a civil suit against Judas Priest and their record label, alleging that the band had used backmasking to hide subliminal messages in their song. They argued that it was exposed when the song was played backwards, revealing the words, "Do it," repeated over and over again, allegedly referring to suicide. The concept of backmasking was quite literally put on trial. Judas Priest's primary defense was that the messages were unintentional, and as lead singer Rob Halford said, manufactured in the mind more than anything else. The case was eventually dismissed. However, the judge stated in his decision that the song did contain subliminal messages. They just weren't direct enough to cause Vance and Belknap to harm themselves, especially considering their previous struggles with self-destructive behavior and substance abuse. But the wording of the decision raised a chilling question. If messages were there, what were they saying? And what was the song telling the listener to do? Marion had mowed lawns all summer in order to afford a trip to the record store. Her best friend Garnet had spent the last few months buying record after record. AC/DC, Alice Cooper, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, Heart. She had them all. Marion was more than a little jealous. She wanted to have a huge collection too, but money was tight. She had enough now to buy a few 45s at least. Maybe that would impress Garnet. Marion surveyed the long stacks, squinting to read the signatures on the concert posters. She loved the way record stores smelled, the paper sleeves and pressed vinyl, the slightest whisper of clove cigarettes. It reminded her of bookstores, the way the soft notes of mold could almost be charming. The long-haired man behind the counter gave her a peace sign. She rolled her eyes. That wasn't her scene at all. She was more ripped jeans and her brother's faded band tees than fringe and peasant bosses. She flipped idly through the first bin of records, looking for anything that caught her interest. Marion browsed, but didn't see anything like the bands on her brother's t-shirts. Everyone looked too mainstream. Popped collars and bright colors assaulted her eyes. Two chipped black fingernails slid over the top of the stack. Marion looked up to see her platinum-haired best friend. Marion offered her a friendly but expletive-filled greeting and proudly pulled out her wadded collection of bills. She was ready to spend some cash. Garnet apologized for falling down on Marion's music education as she took Marion's free hand and dragged her to a different bin. According to Garnet, the best place for records was near the back of the store. Marion's eyes lit up as she saw the album covers. Skulls, bats, and roses with thorns. That was definitely more her style. She combed through the selection with reverence. These were the albums that really had something to say. They challenged the status quo, revealed the real truth of things, all with the added bonus of giving her parents a headache. She picked up a few with interesting titles, placed them on the floor next to her, and kept looking. After how hard she'd worked all summer, she was determined to take her time. She wanted to find something that really spoke to her. As she flipped through the sleeves, her hand touched something icy. Marion stopped. She pulled the record up to get a better look. Her fingers were going numb. It was the searing height of summer, yet it radiated with coldness. She never felt anything like it before. The cover was matte black and blank. She held it up to the light, but no matter how she adjusted her angle, she couldn't find anything at all. No name, no picture. Marion rubbed her hands over the front and felt small dimples in the cardboard. Had they done their cover in Braille? That would be wicked. Garnet gave her a little shove. Marion blinked. She didn't know how long she'd been standing there. According to Garnet, it had been at least 10 minutes. Garnet had a tendency to exaggerate. Still, she apologized and picked her other selections up off the floor. Marion suddenly banged her head to the psychedelic rock they were playing at the front of the store as the hippie cashier rang up her purchases. Marion complimented him on the music playing in the background. He laughed and said he wanted a little of what she was smoking. He needed to flip the record about 5 minutes ago. When he got to the black matte cover, his hands froze. In a strained voice, he asked how Marion got a hold of the album. She told him it was in one of the bins in the back. He shook his head slowly and moved it behind the counter. She felt a strange twitch as it left her vision. Marion asked him to ring it up, but he refused. It wasn't for sale. Garnet was growing impatient, tapping the counter loudly with her rings. Marion couldn't leave the record here. Her hands were clammy, her face flushed. She needed it. She couldn't explain why, but she knew that it had to be hers. It just had to. She'd do anything to keep it. The cashier's eyes grew hard. His relaxed posture went rigid. Marion wasn't afraid of him. She felt the sudden urge to rush him, to rip it out of his hands and shove him down. She turned away from the register. Marion needed air. She was a rebel, but she wasn't a brawler. Garnet must have sensed her distress because she asked the cashier if he could just tell them the name of the album and they could get it somewhere else. His voice was strangely far away as he said they wouldn't find it anywhere. There was no other record like it. Marion didn't believe him. It was a record, mass-printed by the thousands. This couldn't possibly be the only copy. Garnet told Marion to wait outside. She didn't want to, but Garnet tended to be both the boss and the problem solver in their friendship. Marion did as she was told and waited outside. A few minutes later, Garnet came strolling out of the store, empty-handed. Marion was devastated, but before she could ask what happened, Garnet lifted her shirt slightly to reveal a matte black record cover. Marion couldn't believe it. Her best friend had done the impossible. She tackle-hugged her and they rushed down the street. As they rounded the bend to their neighborhood, Garnet explained that she waited for another customer to appear, then spilled a big bin of vinyl in front of the counter. When the cashier came out front to help, Garnet grabbed the record and booked it out of there. Marion's hands shook with excitement as she unlocked the front door to her house. She called out to the empty space, but no one answered her. They were alone. It was perfect. The two girls headed down to the basement. Garnet dragged two furry beanbags to the center of the room. She plopped down on one of them before pulling the record out from under her shirt. Marion held the sleeve reverently. It was still cold to the touch. She lifted the needle and put the vinyl down. Now was the moment of truth. She really hoped the sound would be awesome. She let the needle fall. Static filled the room. Garnet covered her ears as the noise grew louder and louder. Marion lifted the needle. This couldn't be right. There was more to the recording. She just knew it. She picked up the record and examined both sides. There were no scratches, no damage of any kind. Then, she realized she could try one more thing. Marion played the record again, but this time she put her finger on the paper label at the center and pushed it backwards, ever so slightly. The spin reversed direction. Screaming guitars came through the speakers. This was better. The drums pounded so loudly that the walls started to vibrate. Garnet yelped in excitement. Both bobbed their heads in rhythm, then switched to full-on headbanging. It was easy to jump around and thrash when the musicians seemed to be having just as much fun as they were. Marion could hear the faintest words in the background. She strained her ears to hear them. A melodic voice was repeating something. It should have been offbeat with the rest of the music, but it fit in perfectly. Marion took the words in. She felt her vibrations move through her skin and into the very core of her being, blocking out all other sensations. It felt good, simple, complete. There was nothing but the words now. They were part of her. Garnet said something, but Marion was dead to the world. She only wanted more of that voice, that sweet, sultry voice that called to her over and over again. It was everything she wanted, everything she needed, and she would do anything to keep it. Up next, Marion tries to avoid the record's deadly instructions. Hi, it's Greg. Parcast has a brand new series sure to become your next podcast obsession. It's called Medical Murders, and it exposes a dark and disturbing diagnosis that not every doctor wants to extend your life. Every Wednesday, Medical Murders introduces you to the worst the medical community has to offer. Men and women who took an oath to save lives, but instead use their expertise to develop more sinister specialties. Join host Alastair Burton as he examines the formative years and motives of history's most infamous killers, dissecting their medical backgrounds with expert analysis and professional insight provided by practicing MD Dr. David Kipper. You'll investigate a wide range of heinous healthcare workers, like the general practitioner believed to be the most prolific serial killer in modern history, or the dentist who led a double life as a hitman, or even the doctor and gang member who mixed deadly potions for unhappy housewives to use on their husbands. When it comes to these true crime stories, the only thing the doctor ordered is murder. Follow Medical Murders free on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Now back to the story. When music journalists asked Marion about her childhood, she tended to admit she was a weird kid. She'd tell them about stealing records with her best friend Garnet and how they'd listen to them backwards on her parents' old turntable. She didn't tell them about the voice she heard, how it haunted her dreams, soothing and scaring her all at once. She wanted to keep it. She had to keep it at any cost. It had been easy to keep it happy at first, even fun. She did some backmasking on the recording she and Garnet and their friends made in their garage. It was fun to have a little secret, just her and the voice. Then, it told her to hurt Garnet. She said she would never do that, not even for the voice. The voice went quiet at that, perhaps considering. It was quiet for a long time. It was quiet through their Battle of the Bands, their demo recording, signing to a label. Now she was the person she'd always wanted to be, a rock goddess with Garnet at her side. She had her own band t-shirts and her own tour bus to keep her away from her more obsessive fans. Pretty great for a high school dropout. It was so good, in fact, that she forgot about the voice altogether. Bit by bit, she convinced herself that she'd earned every step, every success. But then, at 3 a.m., as she stared up at the ceiling of her Indianapolis hotel room, the itch came back, her ears pricking for a sound she couldn't hear. She wanted the voice. She missed it. No one understood. How could she explain what she was missing without everyone hating her? It was 3 a.m. again when the voice returned, in all its terrible mercy. It wasn't honeyed this time. It was at once manic and matter-of-fact. It had patiently waited for her to understand what it had done for her. And now, the devil must have his due. Marion didn't believe in the devil, or God for that matter. She believed that people made the world better or worse without help. She decided the voice was a fun little phase of her adolescence and nothing more. So when it told her to kill Garnet again, she said no. Her whole body burned. She collapsed to the floor of her hotel room, grimacing in pain. She bit down on her lip to force herself to hold in her anguish. She couldn't let Garnet hear her. She didn't want to risk her coming in when she didn't have things under control. Marion took a deep breath, waiting for her composure to return. But it didn't. It was ebbing. She was being tugged further and further away from herself, like a boat carried by a storm. She tried to resist again, but her senses were overwhelmed by the jangle of the guitar. She felt the rush of comfort wash over her, but it felt wrong. Nonsensical. She hadn't even brought the record with her. Or at least, she thought she hadn't. Yet there it sat, on top of her suitcase, still cool to the touch. The song was louder now, growing comforting, familiar. She relaxed into it like a warm bath, not realizing she was the frog being boiled. The voice said that true sacrifice was the only way to maintain the balance. She hadn't earned her success. Things would right themselves in time, and that was not going to be to her benefit when all was said and done. The music crescendoed. Marion swallowed and decided to do what she was told. She snuck into Garnet's hotel room, screaming silently to herself to stop. But the music played on in her head. Garnet didn't look pretty when she slept, more absurd and adorable. Her jet black hair was splayed out on the pillow like some gothic mermaid. Her mouth was ever so slightly open, her nose and lip piercings glinting in the dark. Marion's fingers twitched as she picked up a pillow from the bed. She tried to scream, to push, to rake Garnet with her fingernails, anything to wake her so she could get away. But Marion's body didn't move. It only hovered, waiting. The voice told her it would be worth it. It told her she would learn to let go in time. Then, it brought the pillow down over Garnet's face. Marion screamed without sound as Garnet's small hand began to claw at her larger ones. She could feel her friend weakening under the pressure. But then, Marion heard a sharp intake of breath beneath her. The pillow lurched as Garnet wrenched it from her hands, throwing it aside. The voice let out a hiss of frustration as Garnet stumbled to sit up in bed. Her chest was heaving, but her fear was quickly giving way to confusion. She asked Marion what was going on, but Marion didn't know what to say. The voice was gone suddenly, hiding. The music was static again, though it still throbbed between her temples. Marion couldn't think of an explanation. She couldn't think of an excuse. She began to cry. And Garnet, scary, sharp-edged Garnet, hugged her. Marion collapsed into her, basking in Garnet's voice for once, the way the rough tones became soft, like mountains worn down by time. Garnet asked if Marion had taken anything, if she was feeling hopeless. Marion shook her head, sniffling. Garnet gave her hand a little squeeze. She asked if Marion had been hearing things, if she wanted to talk about it. A shudder moved through Marion's body. She wasn't sure if it was her or the voice. They felt one and the same now. Garnet tugged Marion gently down the corridor to her room. When they entered, the record was still sitting on top of Marion's suitcase. The room was cold, despite the slowly rising sun. Its soft light made the all-black sleeve glitter. Marion swore she saw a flicker of recognition on Garnet's face, but it was so quick she couldn't be sure. Garnet picked up the record, examining it. She told Marion they would put it on the dresser for safekeeping while they packed to check out. It went faster with Garnet there, and though Marion found herself feeling strangely ill as she left the room, she felt much better when they reached the elevator. Garnet reached down and took Marion's hand as they entered the tour bus. She told Marion she was proud of her, but Marion didn't understand what for. The bus hissed and lurched as it pulled away, leaving the hotel behind. "14 floors up, a teenage boy named John crept into what had been Marion's hotel room. He wasn't obsessed with her, just interested. He never thought a band like Marion's would come to Indianapolis, let alone stay at one of his dad's hotels. He didn't feel bad about searching the room. In a way, this was John's property too. He didn't know what he was looking for, just that he'd know it when he saw it. Something intimate, a way to be closer to Marion, to understand how she thought. But the room was spotless, except for a single item lost in the shuffle. A record in a solid black slipcover. John heard static somewhere behind him. The door slammed shut. Though backmasking refers to intentionally hiding any sort of message in a recording when it's played backwards, It's most closely associated with the Satanic Panic that swept America in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. As interest in the supernatural expanded in the 1970s, Christian conservatives began to see Satanism everywhere, from daycare centers to tabletop role-playing games to music. Pastors were convinced that charismatic and often gender non-conforming rock artists were leaving subliminal messages in their music to seduce good Christian children to the side of the devil. But before we talk about backmasking, we have to talk about the devil in music. And to talk about the devil in music, we have to talk about Robert Johnson. Johnson is often cited as the master and creator of the Delta blues. Johnson was only beginning to take off after releasing 2 session recordings in 1936 and 1937, when he suddenly died. Yet musical luminaries like Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan, Keith Richards, and Robert Plant list him as a major influence on their work. But Johnson is also known for his very own legend, a rumor that he sold his soul at a crossroads in exchange for talent and fame. These sorts of musical Faustian bargains can be found in several Southern folktales, but Johnson's name is most often used. Johnson himself never claimed to have ties with the devil. In fact, despite his talent, he died in relative obscurity less than a year after his second recording session, a far cry from the fame he was supposedly promised, unless that fame was supposed to come after death. But accusations like the ones levied at Robert Johnson persisted for decades after Johnson's death. One of the most famous supposed Faustian bargains involves Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin's lead guitarist. Page does have an interest in the occult, particularly in the English occultist Aleister Crowley. In 1913, Crowley suggested that an aspiring magician must train himself to think backwards by external means, which includes listening to phonograph records reversed. Christian televangelist Paul Crouch likely didn't know that when he suggested that there was a hidden message in the band's iconic Stairway to Heaven in 1982. According to Crouch, if you played the song backwards, you could hear the words, "Here's to my sweet Satan, the one whose little path would make me sad, whose power is Satan. He will give those with him 666. There was a little tool shed where he made us suffer. Sad Satan." If you're listening for it, you might make out the message Crouch claimed Led Zeppelin was hiding. But the garbled words you think you hear are potentially an example of so-called Rorschach audio. Musician and writer Joe Banks coined the term to explain the mind's ability to find patterns of speech in audio recordings, especially when the listener is expecting to. How our brains rearrange seemingly random sounds into sensory information that we can understand, even if that information is translated into terrifying, disembodied voices. Some bands like Slayer and Cradle of Filth actually do put backward recordings in some of their songs, but there is no scientific proof that backmasking can be perceived as subliminal messaging when a recording is played in its normal direction. There's no hypnosis or mesmerism at play, just some Easter eggs for music fans. For their part, both Jimmy Page and Zeppelin lead singer Robert Plant have denied any intention of backmasking. As Page told Musician magazine, "To me it's very sad, because Stairway to Heaven was written with every best intention, and as far as reversing tapes and putting messages on the end, that's not my idea of making music." It's a fair critique, but what if the point for other musicians isn't music at all? What if the actual intention is about getting a message out? Nearly every concept of demons suggests that they must be invited into your world, or into you, before they can appear. There are many ways this can happen, from skipping religious services to the Satanic Panic's worries about Ouija boards and Dungeons and Dragons. The options are dizzying. So who's to say Crowley isn't right? What makes backmasking so sinister is the idea you wouldn't know you'd invited a demon in until it was too late. Until it starts talking to you, too. Thanks again for tuning into Haunted Places. We'll be back on Thursday with a new episode. And don't forget to come back on Tuesday for our Urban Legend series, available only on Spotify. You can find more episodes of Haunted Places and all other Parcast originals for free on Spotify. Not only does Spotify already have all of your favorite music, but now Spotify's making it easy for you to enjoy all of your favorite Parcast originals, like Haunted Places, for free, from your phone, desktop, or smart speaker. To stream Haunted Places on Spotify, just open the app and type Haunted Places in the search bar. Until next time, don't believe some of the things you hear. Believe all of them. Haunted Places was created by Max Cutler and is a Parcast Studios original. Executive producers include Max and Ron Cutler. Sound design by Kenny Hobbs. With production assistance by Ron Shapiro, Carly Madden, and Travis Clark. This episode of Haunted Places was written by Lil D. Ritter and Jennifer Richey, with writing assistance by Greg Castro. I'm Greg Polson.